I'm Sarah, 29 years old, and I'm sitting in this courtroom watching my husband of 6 years laugh as he signs our divorce papers. Michael always thought I was just a naive small-town girl with no real ambition. Little did he know that while he was cheating on me with his co-worker, I was building an empire right under his nose. The judge is about to read my financial statement, and I can't wait to see that smug smile disappear from his face. Before I tell you how my soon-to-be ex-husband's expression completely changed, let me know where you're watching from and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had to stand up for yourself when no one expected you to be capable. I was a small-town girl from Tennessee who moved to Nashville to study accounting at Vanderbilt University. I had big dreams of working in corporate finance despite my humble upbringing. My parents had always taught me the value of hard work and saving money, lessons that would prove invaluable years later. I met Michael at a coffee shop near the university campus. I was there studying for a financial analysis exam when he approached my table. He was a third-year law student from a traditional family of Nashville attorneys, and he radiated the kind of confidence that only comes from never having to worry about money a single day in your life. "You have potential, you just need the right guidance," were his first words to me, looking at my accounting textbook spread across the table. At the time, I thought it was a compliment. Now I realize it was both an insult and a preview of our entire relationship. He seemed perfect, ambitious, charming, successful, and apparently interested in me despite my ordinary background. Our romance was a whirlwind. Michael took me to restaurants I could never afford, weekend trips to Gatlinburg, and introduced me to a lifestyle I had only seen in movies. But from the beginning, he was constantly improving my tastes and social circle. He criticized my Target clothes, suggested I cut my hair in a more sophisticated way, and made subtle comments about my college friends being limited in worldview. I was making a modest income working part-time as an accounting assistant at a small firm. I loved my job, the analytical challenges, and the satisfaction of seeing numbers fit together perfectly. Michael, however, referred to it as my little job, and frequently suggested I didn't even need to work. "Why exhaust yourself for pennies when I can give you everything you need?" he would say, not understanding that my career was about more than money. It was about my identity and independence. After 18 months of dating, he proposed during a romantic weekend in Gatlinburg. The ring was stunning, the champagne expensive, and the moment perfectly orchestrated for maximum impact. Several people in the restaurant even applauded. It felt like a fairy tale, and I said yes without hesitation. Our wedding was an intimate ceremony in Savannah, Georgia. My choice, despite his family's pressure for something grander in Nashville. Looking back, I realized that was one of the few times I managed to hold my ground against the Shannon family expectations. "At least it was in a respectable location, even if it was simple," commented his mother, Margaret, with a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. That was my first real taste of how his family viewed me, as someone who wasn't quite good enough for their son. After our honeymoon in the Caribbean, we moved into his house in Belmead, one of Nashville's most exclusive neighborhoods. Everything was sleek, expensive, and cold, much like his family. I tried to add personal touches, photos, colorful artwork, plants. But Michael preferred the minimalist aesthetic that showcased wealth, rather than our personality as a couple. The first signs of trouble appeared within months. Michael questioned every decorating decision I made, criticized my choice of friends, and made subtle digs about my career path. "Accounting is so common," he said once after meeting some of my colleagues. "You have the potential to be exceptional, but you're wasting it on bookkeeping for companies no one's heard of." I tried to fit into his social circle, the wives of other attorneys and executives who spent their days shopping, at spas, or planning charity events. They were pleasant enough to my face, but I never felt truly accepted. I overheard one of them at a dinner party referring to me as Michael's experiment with the middle class. Instead of defending me, Michael later suggested I try harder to fit in, maybe update my wardrobe or take up tennis. "They just need to see that you're making an effort to adapt to our lifestyle," he explained, as if my identity was something to be molded and corrected. Those early years were a confusing mix of luxury and loneliness, being showered with expensive gifts while feeling my self-worth diminish. I was slowly becoming what Michael wanted, a trophy wife who reflected well on him, while the independent, creative woman I had been was fading away. 2 years into our marriage, the tensions that had been simmering beneath the surface began to boil over. Michael had always been particular about our finances, but his behavior became increasingly controlling. Despite our joint accounts, he questioned every purchase I made, while spending lavishly on himself without discussion. "Did you really need another set of professional development books?" he would ask, examining the credit card statement. "That's $150 that could have been invested." Meanwhile, he thought nothing of dropping thousands on a new golf membership or expensive watches. Gradually, I found myself isolated from my friends and family. Visits to my parents in small-town Tennessee became less frequent because Michael always had an excuse. A work event, a dinner with clients, or simply that rural Tennessee is too provincial for my taste. My college friends stopped calling after Michael made it clear they weren't sophisticated enough for his home. Your friend Jessica asked if our wine was from California, he scoffed after a dinner party I had organized. As if we would serve domestic wine to guests. It's embarrassing, Sarah. My career, which had once been a source of pride, became a constant battleground. When I was offered a promotion to senior accountant, Michael wasn't supportive. Is the modest bump in salary worth the extra hours away from home? He questioned. We're planning to start a family soon, remember? This was news to me. Whenever I brought up having children, he always said the timing wasn't right. It was around this time that I discovered my passion for financial consulting. The firm I worked for was expanding its services, and I volunteered to learn the advisory and strategic planning aspects. I found I had a natural talent for understanding investment patterns and creating financial strategies that delivered real results. Excited about this new direction, I shared my idea of eventually starting my own boutique financial consulting firm with Michael. His response was crushing. Sarah, be realistic. Starting a business requires business acumen, which isn't exactly your strong suit. Besides, most small businesses fail within the first year. Why risk what we have? Our approaches to money highlighted our fundamental differences. Michael believed in conspicuous consumption, the right address, the right car, the right vacation spots, all to maintain an image of success. I, with my middle-class upbringing, believed in saving, investing wisely, and finding value rather than just high price tags. As our third anniversary approached, Michael's late nights at the office became the norm rather than the exception. Big client, market analysis, quarterly reports. His excuses varied, but his absence remained constant. I ate dinner alone most nights, went to bed alone, and increasingly lived the life of someone single, but with the financial scrutiny of a child receiving an allowance. Our first truly major argument came after his family's annual Christmas gathering. In the car ride home, his mother had pointedly asked when we would be giving her grandchildren. I mentioned that I was ready whenever Michael was, only to have him smoothly change the subject. When I confronted him at home, his reaction was cold. Children are a massive responsibility and expense, he said, loosening his tie. With your modest career and my family's expectations, any child of ours would need trust funds, private schooling, the right connections. We're not there yet financially. Not there yet? I questioned, genuinely confused. Michael, you make 6 figures. Your family has generational wealth. What are we waiting for? His response was telling. My money isn't the issue. You still haven't established yourself properly. What would you contribute to a child's future? The hurt of his words festered for days. His dismissive attitude toward my career, insignificant, he called my salary during another argument, solidified something in me. I needed financial independence. Not just for myself, but for my sanity. That week, I opened a separate bank account at a different bank. I set up a small direct deposit from my paycheck, not enough that Michael would notice if he checked our joint accounts, but enough to start building something of my own. Simultaneously, I began educating myself on financial independence. I read books on investing, took free online courses on business management, and subscribed to newsletters about entrepreneurship. All of this I did in private browsing modes, careful not to leave digital breadcrumbs for Michael to discover. The woman who had once been swept off her feet by grand gestures and expensive dinners was slowly awakening to the gilded cage she lived in and planning her escape, one small step at a time. While Michael continued his late nights at work, I began laying the foundation for my independence. Using my growing separate savings, I registered a small business entity, Sarah Mitchell Financial Solutions, and built a simple but professional website showcasing my portfolio and services. My first challenge was finding time to work on my business without Michael knowing. I converted our rarely used guest bedroom into a home office, explaining to Michael that I needed a dedicated space for continuing education to advance at the firm. He barely paid attention to the change, dismissing my professional development as cute ambition rather than a serious endeavor. Just don't let it interfere with our social obligations, was his only concern. My first client came through a stroke of luck at our local coffee shop. I overheard Elena Rodriguez, the owner of a growing catering business, complaining about the expensive quotes she'd received from financial advisors. I can't afford $10,000 for a financial plan, but I'm losing money somewhere and can't figure out where, she told her business partner. I introduced myself, explained my background, and offered to help her at a fraction of the cost, with the understanding that I was building my portfolio. Elena took a chance on me, and the results exceeded both our expectations. I identified inefficiencies in her cash flow, restructured her payment terms with vendors, and created an investment strategy for her profits that increased her returns by 40% in the first quarter. The transformation was dramatic enough that she referred me to other small business owners in her network. Working with Elena not only gave me my first success story, but also a genuine friendship, something I had been missing in Michael's curated social circle. She was authentic, hardworking, and appreciated my skills in a way my husband never had. "You have a gift, Sarah," she told me over coffee one day. "You understand money in ways that help real people build real wealth. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." I worked late nights while Michael was away on his increasingly frequent business trips. I converted our walk-in closet into a makeshift office for client calls, using blankets to dampen the sound. Every new client was both exhilarating and terrifying. Exhilarating because my business was growing. Terrifying because discovery would mean confrontation. The learning curve was steep. I made mistakes, undercharging for complex projects, occasionally overpromising on timelines. But I learned quickly. Each client taught me something new about running a business, about setting boundaries, about valuing my own expertise. I used my savings to invest in essential software and certifications, carefully hiding the charges among household expenses or making cash purchases. My client list grew steadily over the course of a year, primarily through referrals and word of mouth. Rather than spending the profits, I reinvested most of them back into the business and began setting aside a portion for strategic investments. Michael remained oblivious, attributing my increasing confidence to finally adjusting to our lifestyle rather than professional fulfillment. A pivotal moment came when I worked with a tech startup founder whose financial restructuring after my consultation helped her secure a major funding round. The success story was featured in a Nashville business magazine. I had to decline being mentioned by name, citing privacy reasons, but the credibility gave me access to larger clients. Through Elena, I met Patricia Chen, a serial entrepreneur who had sold her previous company for 8 figures and was launching a fintech startup. Initially hiring me for a small project, Patricia quickly became both a valued client and mentor. "You're charging too little for your expertise," she told me bluntly after reviewing my rate sheet. "Triple your prices and watch how your perceived value changes." She was right. When I raised my rates, instead of losing clients, I attracted more established businesses willing to pay for quality. Patricia also introduced me to the world of angel investing and strategic portfolio management. "Cash loses value sitting still," she explained. "You need to make your money work for you." Under her guidance, I began making strategic investments in emerging companies, including Patricia's new venture, which focused on AI-driven financial planning tools. I started with small amounts, but as my business grew, so did my investment portfolio. The exhilaration of watching both my business and investments grow was intoxicating. For the first time since meeting Michael, I felt truly alive, purposeful, and independent. I was building something valuable entirely on my own merits. Throughout this period, I maintained the appearance of being just Michael's wife at social functions. I nodded politely when his colleagues' wives discussed their shopping trips and charity committees. I attended his work dinners and played the supportive spouse role flawlessly, all while running a growing business from our home and making investment decisions that would alter the course of my life. My double life was exhausting but empowering. Each new client, each successful consultation, each investment return was a step toward the freedom I increasingly realized I needed, from my controlling marriage. 4 years into our marriage, the facade began to crumble. It started with a text message that appeared on Michael's phone while he was in the shower. A preview visible on his lock screen from someone named A that read, "Missing you already. Last night was..." The message disappeared before I could read more, but it planted a seed of suspicion that I couldn't ignore. Michael had been more distant than usual, often coming home smelling of unfamiliar perfume that he claimed was from hugging colleagues goodbye at networking events. Rather than confronting him immediately, I decided to investigate. I noted his patterns: the late Thursday meetings that always ran until after 9, the weekend conferences that never had websites I could find, the sudden increase in client dinners at a specific upscale restaurant downtown. The following Thursday, I told Michael I was visiting Elena to help with a special corporate event at her catering company. Instead, I parked my car near the restaurant he frequented and waited. At 8:30, his BMW pulled into the parking lot. 10 minutes later, a red Mercedes arrived, and a woman with blonde hair stepped out. Even from a distance, I recognized Amanda Walsh, his colleague from the law firm. I watched them embrace in a way colleagues never would, saw him kiss her in the parking lot before they entered the restaurant together. My hands shook as I took photos with my phone, my stomach a hollow pit of betrayal and confirmation. I gave them 30 minutes before I walked into the restaurant. They were at a corner table, his hand on hers, leaning in intimately. I approached silently, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure everyone could hear it. "This explains the late meetings," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. Michael jerked back, his face cycling through shock, guilt, and finally settling on annoyance at being caught. Amanda had the decency to look embarrassed, gathering her purse and mumbling something about using the restroom. "Sarah, this isn't what it looks like," Michael began, using the same smooth tone he employed with difficult clients. "Really? Because it looks like you're having dinner with your girlfriend while your wife thinks you're working." The conversation that followed was surreal. Michael offered a half-hearted apology, claimed it was just physical, and had the audacity to blame me for his infidelity. "You've been so wrapped up in your little accounting projects," he said, lowering his voice as neighboring diners began to notice our tension. "You've become boring, Sarah, unambitious. When was the last time you made an effort in our marriage?" I left the restaurant alone, driving aimlessly for hours before returning home. Michael came back past midnight, offering promises to end the affair, suggesting counseling, even proposing a second honeymoon. For reasons I didn't fully understand then, I pretended to consider reconciliation. "I need time," I told him, which wasn't a lie. I needed time, not to forgive him, but to plan my next steps. The weeks that followed were a masterclass in deception on both our parts. Michael became temporarily attentive, bringing flowers, suggesting date nights, while I began consulting with divorce attorneys during my supposed meetings with clients. Rebecca Torres, a formidable divorce attorney recommended by Patricia, laid out the reality of my situation. "Tennessee is an equitable distribution state," she explained. "Without a prenuptial agreement, the court will divide marital assets based on what they deem fair, not necessarily equal." I learned about our financial entanglements, the complexity of divorcing someone with family money, and the importance of documenting everything. "Knowledge is power, especially in divorce," Rebecca said. My cautious information gathering came to an abrupt halt when Michael discovered my browser history on our shared computer. I had forgotten to use private browsing for one search: Tennessee Divorce Asset Division Process. His rage was immediate and frightening. He cornered me in our kitchen, waving his phone with the screenshot he'd taken. "Is this what you've been doing? Planning to divorce me and take my money?" His face was red, a vein pulsing in his forehead. "Let me make this clear, Sarah. You'll have nothing without me. Nothing. My family's lawyers will make sure of it." I remained calm, which only infuriated him more. "I'm not planning anything, Michael. I was just researching after what happened. Wouldn't you do the same?" He seemed mollified by my explanation, but the threat lingered between us. That night, I moved all my important business documents to secure cloud storage and began transferring digital records to drives I kept in a safety deposit box Michael knew nothing about. The final discovery came 3 weeks later. While organizing our closet, a task Michael never participated in, I found a jewelry receipt tucked inside his dress shoes. It was from Tiffany & Co., dated 2 months prior, for a diamond tennis bracelet costing nearly $12,000. I had never received such a gift. Even knowing about the affair, this evidence of his tangible investment in another woman stung in a way I hadn't expected. The receipt showed he had spent our money, supposedly our money, on Amanda. Before I could process this new betrayal, I heard the front door open. Voices. Michael and a woman laughing in our entryway. I remained frozen in our closet as they entered our bedroom, clearly not expecting me home in the middle of the day. I stepped out to find Michael and Amanda embracing at the foot of our bed, the bed we had shared for 4 years. "Sarah!" Michael exclaimed, not bothering to step away from Amanda. "You're supposed to be at work." "I took a half day," I replied, surprised by my own composure. Clearly, I should have called first. What followed was not the emotional confrontation movies had prepared me for. Instead, Michael became coldly pragmatic. "Well, this saves me having to have a difficult conversation," he said, straightening his tie. "I want a divorce, Sarah. Amanda and I are planning a future together." His confidence was absolute as he outlined his terms. He would generously allow me to keep my personal items and a small settlement that would help me get back on my feet. The house, our investments, even the furniture we had purchased together would remain his. "My lawyers will be in touch," he concluded, seemingly confused by my lack of hysteria or pleading. You should find somewhere else to stay starting tonight. Actually, I said, as this is still legally my residence too, I'll be staying. You and Amanda are welcome to find a hotel. His face darkened at my defiance, but Amanda tugged at his arm. Let's go, Michael. We can deal with this later. As they left, Michael turned back with one parting shot. You'll regret not taking my generous offer. By the time my lawyers are done, you'll be lucky to afford a trailer park in the worst part of Nashville. I closed the door behind them, leaned against it, and for the first time since discovering his affair, I smiled. Michael had no idea what was coming. The day after I caught Michael and Amanda in our bedroom, he moved most of his clothes and personal items out of the house. I changed the locks that same afternoon, legally questionable, but it gave me time to properly document our belongings before he could remove anything valuable. Michael's assumption about my financial naivety quickly became apparent in the initial settlement offer his lawyer sent over, a one-time payment of $50,000 and 6 months of living expenses. In exchange, I would make no claims on any of our other assets, including the house I had helped furnish and maintain over 4 years. He's testing the waters, Rebecca explained when I showed her the offer. He's assuming you don't know your rights or the true extent of your marital assets. With Rebecca's guidance, I formally rejected the offer and began the process of financial discovery, a legal mechanism requiring both parties to disclose all assets and liabilities. Michael's response was to have his lawyer delay and obfuscate at every turn. This is a standard tactic, Rebecca assured me. They're hoping to drain your resources and patience until you accept less than you deserve. What Michael didn't realize was that I wasn't depending on his disclosures. I had been tracking our joint finances meticulously for years, including accounts he thought I didn't know about. More importantly, I had my own growing resources that he knew nothing about. After careful consideration and consultation with Rebecca, we made a strategic decision. I would temporarily withhold the true scope of my business and investments during the initial phases of negotiation. Tennessee law generally considered businesses started during marriage to be marital property. But Rebecca identified a potential exception based on the fact that Michael had actively discouraged my business and provided no support, financial or otherwise, in its creation. We'll disclose everything at the right time, she assured me. But for now, let's let him believe his own narrative about you. While the legal process inched forward, Michael launched a social offensive. Mutual friends began avoiding my calls. Invitations to social events dried up. Even our neighbors, who had always been friendly, became coldly professional. I later learned that Michael had been spreading a narrative that I had cheated on him, that I was mentally unstable, and that he was divorcing me despite his best efforts to save our marriage. In the circles where his family name carried weight, his version of events was accepted without question. The pain of this social exile was unexpectedly sharp. People I had shared holidays with, celebrated milestones with, shared confidences with, all vanished from my life based on Michael's lies. All except Elena and Patricia, who never wavered in their support. People who believe gossip without hearing both sides aren't worth your energy, Elena told me over emergency pastries in her catering kitchen after a particularly difficult day. Focus on building your new life, not mourning the old one. Michael's attempts to intimidate me escalated as he realized I wasn't going to quietly accept his terms. There were late-night phone calls with thinly veiled threats about making sure you never work in this city again, and even a suggestion that he would report my business for tax irregularities. An empty threat since my business finances were meticulously documented. His family joined the pressure campaign. His mother, Margaret, called to reason with me. We always knew you weren't right for Michael, she said, her voice dripping with condescension. But we accepted you because he chose you. Don't make this difficult, Sarah. Take what's being offered and move on with dignity. I maintained my composure through it all, a skill I had perfected during years of enduring subtle put-downs at Shannon family gatherings. Thank you for your concern, Margaret. I'll be guided by my attorney's advice. Michael's overconfidence began working against him. Believing I had no resources to fight a prolonged legal battle, he made several critical mistakes. He failed to disclose investment accounts that I had documentation for. He underreported the value of his stock portfolio. He claimed certain assets were separate property when they had been clearly purchased with marital funds. Rebecca documented each discrepancy meticulously, building a case that would eventually undermine his credibility with the court. Meanwhile, my company experienced exponential growth during the separation period. A financial restructuring plan I designed for a regional restaurant chain helped them avoid bankruptcy and triple their profits, leading to features in industry publications. I had to decline interviews, citing personal reasons, but the professional recognition brought in a flood of new clients. The major breakthrough came when I secured a contract with a national retail chain to overhaul their entire financial strategy. a six-figure deal that transformed my business from successful to exceptional. I hired 4 employees, rented a professional office space in downtown Nashville, and began turning down clients whose values didn't align with my company's mission. All of this happened as Michael and his legal team continued to characterize me as a struggling bookkeeper dependent on her husband's support. His perception of me as the naive small-town girl dazzled by his wealth had calcified to the point where he couldn't conceive of my success independent of him. During this time, Patricia introduced me to a group of angel investors looking to fund promising fintech startups. My combination of practical financial expertise and technology vision impressed them enough to offer seed funding for a revolutionary financial planning app I had been developing. The app, which used AI to provide personalized financial advice for small businesses and individuals, launched in beta with overwhelming positive response. Within 6 months, we had 50,000 users and were fielding acquisition offers from major financial institutions. I also made strategic investments in several other startups, leveraging my network and financial expertise to identify companies with exceptional growth potential. My portfolio diversified across technology, real estate, and emerging markets, all carefully managed to maximize returns while minimizing risk. The night before our final court date, I sat alone in the house that had never felt like home, reflecting on my journey. 4 years earlier, I had been so eager to please Michael that I had begun to lose myself. His betrayal, painful as it was, had forced me to rediscover my strength, ambition, and worth. I packed a small overnight bag. Regardless of the judge's decision, I had decided I would not spend another night in the space where my marriage had unraveled. My new penthouse apartment was ready, purchased through an LLC Michael knew nothing about, furnished with pieces I had chosen for their beauty and comfort, rather than their status value. As I zipped the bag closed, my phone chimed with a text from Patricia. "Remember who you are tomorrow, not who he tried to make you be." With those words in my heart, I prepared to face the final act of my marriage to Michael Shannon. The morning of our court date dawned clear and crisp. I dressed in a navy blue suit, conservative but confident, with a single piece of jewelry, a small diamond pendant Elena and Patricia had given me to mark my business's 2nd anniversary. "Your Independence Diamond," they had called it. I arrived at the courthouse 30 minutes early, as Rebecca had advised. Michael was already there, looking expensive in a tailored charcoal suit, his attorney David Harrison beside him. David was a senior partner at one of Nashville's most prestigious law firms and had a reputation for aggressive divorce settlements that favored wealthy clients. Michael smirked when he saw me, leaning over to whisper something to David that made both men chuckle. His confidence was palpable. He believed this was merely a formality before his inevitable victory. Rebecca arrived moments later, immaculate in a burgundy suit that stood out against the courthouse's muted colors. Unlike David with his team of junior associates, Rebecca worked with precision and purpose, radiating a quiet competence that had reassured me from our first meeting. "Ready?" she asked, her expression giving nothing away to observing eyes. "More than ready," I replied. Judge Catherine Williams's courtroom was intimidating in its austerity. The judge herself, a woman in her 50s with silver hair and penetrating eyes, had a reputation for fairness but little patience for games or emotional displays. As proceedings began, Michael put on a performance worthy of an Oscar. His testimony painted him as the devoted husband who had supported his wife's modest career ambitions, only to be repaid with ingratitude and unreasonable demands in the divorce. "I just want a fair resolution, Your Honor," he said, his voice modulated to convey reasonable disappointment. "I've offered Mrs. Shannon a generous settlement that would allow her to maintain a comfortable lifestyle while she rebuilds her career." David presented their case for the division of assets, highlighting Michael's family wealth as separate property, minimizing my contributions to our marital assets, and suggesting that the house, purchased primarily with his earnings, should remain his property. Throughout their presentation, I maintained my composure, neither reacting to Michael's fabrications nor revealing my emotions. Judge Williams occasionally glanced my way, her expression unreadable. When it came time to sign the initial divorce decree separating our marital status while financial matters were finalized, Michael made a show of it. He signed with a flourish, a laugh escaping his lips as he capped his Mont Blanc pen. As he returned to his seat, he passed close enough to whisper, "Enjoy going back to your parents' farm." Rebecca's presentation began methodically, her approach a stark contrast to David's theatrical arguments. She presented evidence of Michael's financial deceptions during our marriage, the hidden accounts, the lavish spending on Amanda, the pattern of financial control. "Your Honor," Rebecca said, "Mr. Shannon has not been forthcoming about the full extent of marital assets as required by Tennessee law." She submitted documentation of accounts Michael had failed to disclose, including dates, account numbers, and approximate balances. Michael shifted uncomfortably in his seat as Rebecca continued, his smug expression giving way to nervous glances at David. David requested a brief recess, which Judge Williams denied. "I believe we should continue, Counselor. I'm particularly interested in hearing about these undisclosed assets." The atmosphere in the courtroom tensed as Rebecca methodically dismantled Michael's financial deceptions. Judge Williams's expression grew increasingly stern as the evidence mounted. "Furthermore, Your Honor," Rebecca continued, "we request that the court consider Mrs. Shannon's separate property that was established during the marriage but without any contribution or support from Mr. and Shannon." This was the moment we had prepared for. Judge Williams looked up from her notes. "Please elaborate, Counselor." "Mrs. Shannon established a financial consulting business during the marriage. Mr. Shannon not only provided no support for this venture, but actively discouraged it and belittled her professional ambitions, as evidenced by these communications." Rebecca presented emails and text messages where Michael had dismissed my business as a hobby and discouraged my entrepreneurial goals. Judge Williams reviewed the documents carefully before addressing me directly for the first time. "Mrs. Shannon, the court requires full financial disclosure from both parties. Have you submitted complete information about this business venture?" "Not yet, Your Honor," I replied as we had planned. "My complete financial statement is ready for submission today." Rebecca handed the court clerk a sealed envelope containing my complete financial disclosure, the document we had strategically held back until this moment. "I request that the court review Mrs. Shannon's financial statement before making any determinations about asset division," Rebecca said. Judge Williams nodded and opened the envelope. The courtroom fell silent as she read, her eyebrows rising slightly, the only indication of surprise from the otherwise composed judge. After what felt like an eternity, Judge Williams looked up. "For the record, I will read the summary of Mrs. Shannon's assets." My heart pounded as she began to read. "Sarah Mitchell Financial Solutions, a financial consulting firm established 3 years ago. Current valuation based on revenue, contracts, and intellectual property, $2,100,000. Michael's head snapped up, his expression of disbelief almost comical. "Investment portfolio, including technology stocks, real estate, and startup investments, $1,900,000. Michael gripped the table, his knuckles white. "Real estate holdings, 2 properties purchased within the last 18 months, valued at $1,200,000. By now, Michael looked physically ill. His face drained of color, his body rigid with shock. Beside him, David was frantically whispering, but Michael seemed unable to process what he was hearing. "Total disclosed assets, $200,000, Judge Williams concluded. The courtroom remained silent. Michael stared at me as if seeing a stranger. In that moment, I felt no triumph, no vindication, just a profound relief that the truth was finally on record. Judge Williams broke the silence. "Mr. Shannon, do you wish to revise any of your previous statements regarding Mrs. Shannon's financial dependence on you?" Michael seemed incapable of speech. David stood quickly. "Your Honor, we were unaware of these assets. We contend that as they were acquired during the marriage, Mr. Shannon is entitled to an equitable portion." Rebecca was prepared for this argument. "Your Honor, we direct the court's attention to the prenuptial agreement signed by both parties prior to marriage, specifically Clause 15. This was our ace. When reviewing our prenup years after signing, Rebecca had discovered a clause Michael's own lawyers had included. Any business enterprise created by either spouse during the marriage without capital investment from the other spouse shall remain separate property in the event of divorce. The clause was likely included to protect Mr. Shannon's potential ventures, Rebecca explained. However, the language applies equally to Mrs. Shannon's business, which she built without any financial contribution from Mr. Shannon. Judge Williams reviewed the prenuptial agreement, nodding slowly. "The language is indeed clear. Ms. Torres, please continue." Rebecca outlined how I had built my business from scratch, using my own savings and reinvesting profits, all while Michael actively discouraged my efforts. She presented statements from clients and mentors attesting to my independent work and business acumen. Throughout Rebecca's presentation, I watched Michael. The man who had laughed while signing our divorce papers just hours earlier now sat frozen, his confident demeanor shattered. Amanda, who had been sitting in the gallery, slipped out of the courtroom, her expression unreadable. Judge Williams took 20 minutes to review all documents before delivering her ruling. When she returned, her decision was clear. Based on the evidence presented and the terms of the prenuptial agreement, the court finds that Sarah Mitchell Financial Solutions and the resulting investment portfolio constitute separate property belonging solely to Mrs. Shannon. Michael made a strangled sound, somewhere between a gasp and a protest. Furthermore, Judge Williams continued, given Mr. Shannon's failure to fully disclose marital assets as required by law, the court is inclined to view the division of remaining marital assets in a light more favorable to Mrs. Shannon. The rest of her ruling was a blur of legal terms, but the outcome was clear. I would keep my business, my investments, and my properties. Additionally, I would receive a greater portion of our actual marital assets due to Michael's deception. The house would be sold with proceeds divided according to the judge's formula, which heavily favored me. As we stood to leave, Michael approached me, his lawyer trying unsuccessfully to hold him back. "You planned this," he hissed, his face contorted with rage and humiliation. "All these years you were just waiting to take me down." I looked at the man I had once loved, now a stranger consumed by his own narrative of victimhood. "No, Michael. I built something while you were busy destroying what we had. That's the difference between us." Rebecca gently guided me away, leaving Michael standing alone in the emptying courtroom, the remnants of his superiority complex lying in shambles around him. Walking out of the courthouse that day felt less like a victory and more like liberation. The weight of deception, both Michael's and my own necessary secrecy, lifted from my shoulders with each step down those marble stairs. Today, my company has expanded internationally. My investments continue to grow, and I've used my resources to establish a foundation helping women achieve financial independence. Michael attempted reconciliation once he knew my net worth, but I had moved far beyond the woman who once sought his approval. If you're watching this and facing your own crossroads of underestimation or betrayal, remember that sometimes what seems like an ending is actually a beginning in disguise. Your worth isn't determined by someone else's inability to see it. Have you ever had someone underestimate you only to prove them spectacularly wrong? Share your story in the comments below. And if this resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear that their value isn't defined by anyone else's perception. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember, sometimes losing what you thought you wanted leads you directly to what you truly deserve.